Hello and welcome to Brian Lomax Movie Talk. Joining me is a very special guest, Steve, aka the Lawn Gnome, for the fourth part of our series on the DC animated original movies. Tonight we are going to be covering Batman related ones. So I've been looking forward to this particular show because, as anyone knows, I'm a die-hard Batman fan, and the three movies we are covering tonight are all the Frank Miller adaptations. So Frank Miller's Year One storyline, which I still personally believe to be the best comic book storyline of all time, and the Dark Knight Returns storyline, which many other people believe to be the best of all time. For me, still Year One. But yeah, they're the movies we're discussing, with the Catwoman short thrown in for good measure. But yeah, Steve, do you want to say anything just to lead us into it?
Well, of course I do. And of course, Brian, it's a pleasure to get back together with you again. And of course, we also have to mention, everybody, that there still is a third person in this grouping, and that is Melissa from the Bookish Babbler. And she was ready to go. She was so excited. She said she was going to be extremely torn if she couldn't talk about Batman. And lo and behold, I know I love capitalism, but sometimes it can be a real pain in the butt, especially if you want to do something good with your friends. But look, money's money. She had to work, and she had no choice in the matter, but she is sorry that she can't be there. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about the rest of the DC Universe films, and this is going to be the conclusion of Book 4. And actually, yeah, Book 3 or 4, I don't even remember anymore. It's been such a long time since we've done this. Either way, I'll definitely double check that. But anyway, we split this book up because of the fact that Batman just stands out on its own. And it's very difficult to talk about any films alongside these two specific stories because they are done by one of the men who practically revolutionized the comic book industry. After decades of the comic book code and the campiness holding us down, we got back to the dark, true, dirt, nitty-gritty heroes with Frank Miller. And if you guys saw my advertisements, I did say that this was presented by Funko because I've got a Batman Funko shirt on and I'm ready to go and talk about everything Batman here. And I'm really excited because these are two stories that I remember reading as a younger guy with the graphic novels. I'm actually a proud owner of The Dark Knight Returns. It's one of my favorite Batman stories. And I'm just really excited to see how they interpreted them into film. But before we begin with that, Brian and I cannot continue this without saying a job well done and tributing to the great Andrea Romano, who was responsible since the very beginning of Bruce Timm's animated creations. She was responsible for picking the voice, directing, and doing the voice, and choosing the voice actors to begin this amazing journey for DC animation and television, and bringing it to this point where we are now. While Marvel may be dominating the box office at the theater, DC still manages to monopolize the small screen in terms of superheroes. And without Andrea Romano, it probably would not have been possible. So she was fantastic, and I wish her all the best and a job well done in the world of animation.
Yeah, you think about some of the voices we've heard playing these characters over the years. You think about Mark Hamill as the Joker, Kevin Conroy as Batman,
Roddy McDowell as the Mad Hatter, Ron Perlman as Clayface, Richard Mall as
Bliss Jr. as Alfred. You know, it's just such an array of voice talent that has literally defined some of these characters. Not to mention Harley Quinn. Blimey, Eileen Sorkin as Harley Quinn is just wow.
And she practically skyrocketed Tara Strong's career, and they also even as the show went on, they gave us, oh my goodness, they gave us Gilbert Gottfried voicing, and they even gave, you can't look at Lex Luthor and not think of Clancy Brown, just like you can't look at the Joker and not think of Mark Hamill.
No, it's just like when you're comparing some of the live action versions of these characters, people often say, well, I know it's animated, it's not live action, but Hamill has to be in contention as one of the best Jokers. And that just shows how well the job was done in casting these characters. Absolutely. And that's down to Romano. So yeah, absolutely.
So
it'll be interesting to see where they go actually without her now on that side of things, whether the casting will still be as inspiring, shall we say.
Yeah, I'll definitely mention the new voice director's name when we get to that juncture in this library. But let's begin. Let's start off with what you just said before we went live. Let's talk about one of your all-time favorite Batman stories from Frank Miller, and that's Batman Year One.
Yeah, I remember Christmas 1992. 92 was kind of when I first became a full-on Batman fan. The first Tim Burton Batman film had played on Christmas Day in 91. And I taped it off the TV, and then pretty much every week at some point I would have watched that film on video, leading up to the release of Batman Returns, which I think was in July. And then I watched Batman Returns at the cinema, and that was it. I was just hooked, and I got my first comic book, Batman Returns, and it was the movie adaptation. Which it was a bit naff, but for someone who'd never read comic books, that was my first comic book. And like when I was a kid, me and my brothers, we'd get like £100 each to spend at Christmas. Mum and dad would be like, pick what you want out of the Argos catalogue or wherever, and just like just pick what you want up to the value of £100, and you'll be surprised. We'll pick from the list, and you won't know exactly what you're getting, but hey ho. And I just said to my mum and dad, look, all I want this Christmas is graphic novels, Batman graphic novels. And this is going back when graphic novels were, you could pick one up for a £5. Like £5 over here, £5 over here is like what, $6.99 over there.
Pretty much.
They were cheap anyway, really cheap. So like I was looking at like 20 graphic novels for £100 back then, which these days, no chance. You got no chance of getting 20 graphic novels for £100. But yeah, so that was my Christmas. I got an absolute shed load of Batman graphic novels, and I spent the next few weeks just sifting through them, reading them, soaking them up, getting immersed in the comic book world of Batman. And amongst those was Batman Year One, the Frank Miller story. And that was the one that I always kept going back to. Batman versus Predator as well, the first Batman versus Predator.
I remember that.
Yeah, I had a real soft spot for that. I loved the artwork in it, and because I'm such a fan of Predator anyway, I just thought it was just a really well done crossover, I thought. So that more for entertainment value, but Batman Year One just grabbed me because it literally felt like a movie on the page. I was reading it and I'm thinking, my goodness, this would really work as a film. If you shot this as a film, it would work on the big screen because there was no outlandish costumed villains. It was all really down to earth, gritty, felt like a real city. Just absolute realism. It wasn't until Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy that you kind of got a sense of what Frank Miller was going for in Batman Year One. And of course he brought a lot, and of course Nolan took a lot of inspiration for Batman Begins from Batman Year One, and we'll definitely talk about some of the specific characters that were actually in Batman Year One that did in fact come to the big screen in Batman Begins in 2005. Yeah, definitely. But it's just, I mean, that's the graphic novel, but the question is, does the film live up to that? Because we are obviously we're here not to talk about the graphic novels, but
Of course.
but the films. So for me, I love this film. And you know, I've heard a few people be quite sniffy about it. You know, when I've read up on it, when I've tried to see what other people think about it, a lot of people seem really sniffy. I think because it's quite a condensed film. It moves along at quite a pace. It's only like an hour long. And if I had one bugbear, it probably would be that it could be longer. But I think it's a good thing when you're left wanting more rather than thinking, oh, actually, I wish they hadn't bothered. And I know a lot of people do think that when it comes to this film, but I'm not one of them. What I will say is that while I love Bryan Cranston as Commissioner Gordon, I don't dislike Ben McKenzie as Batman, but I must say I'm not fully sold on him for most of the time. Sometimes he works, and then there are other times where he does just sound far too young. And I know this is Batman in his younger days. He's in his early 30s when he's in this story. But even so, he does sound a little bit kind of schoolboy to me. But that's other than that, he does do fine work in other, in certain parts of the episode. But I think what it is as well is sometimes he sounds a little bit monotone, a bit zombie-like. But yeah. Other than that, I think it's beautifully animated, really well animated, and I just love the story. I think it's been translated very well. Like I say, it was very cinematic on the page, so it stands to reason that it would translate well here in animated form. So, yeah, really made up with it, to be honest. And, what are your initial thoughts on it?
Well, one of my interests about this film, when I heard that they were making it, I was really excited because it's one of the best Batman stories ever told. But my question was going to be, how are they going to do it? Are they going to try and make it feel like a movie or were they actually going to make it be exactly from page to screen? And they took the page to screen route. And when I take a look back at some of the other films where they took that route, specifically Justice League: A New Frontier, what Darwyn Cooke said about that adaptation was the best part about that film adaptation was how it was able to give you a scene between the panels of the comic. And to a certain degree, Batman Year One does the exact same thing. I'm glad that they kept the narration. I'm glad that they made it feel like Commissioner Gordon, he wasn't even commissioner back then, but Jim Gordon was telling the story. And what I also really liked about this, and it's kind of funny because Todd McFarlane, who creates Spawn, is working on a new Spawn movie, and he's trying to tell it from one of the famous cop duo, Sam and Twitch's perspective. He wants to do it from Twitch's perspective. It's very similar to Batman Year One because it's not so much a Batman story. It's more so Commissioner Gordon's story, basically coming to Gotham as a beat cop, learning the ranks, but more importantly, seeing the corruption in the police department and not giving in to the pressure. And then all of a sudden, when Batman starts showing up in little pieces, he suddenly realizes that he has a lot more of an ability to weed out the corruption and turn the Gotham City PD into the great police force that it's supposed to be. And of course, as Batman fans, we all know that in a city like Gotham, the fact that they have a police force like that is fantastic. But I did love the fact that they kept it like the actual source material. As far as the animation, it looks like it came right out of the comics, especially the beautiful color palette with the dull blues, browns, yellows, and purples. And they said that when Frank Miller used that specific color palette, he wanted to make his story like he wanted you to feel like it was an uncomfortable place to be. Like you could tell that it was seething with crime and grit and corruption and nerdiness, like, and that worked out fantastically. And I also was very impressed with the voice cast. I mean, I love Bryan Cranston, and I think he was a fantastic Commissioner Gordon. It steamed me when I found out that there were rumors that he was going to play Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman. I think he would have killed it, as far as I'm concerned. But I loved him as Jim Gordon. And Ben McKenzie, I actually agree with you. I feel that Batman was a little bit one-dimensional. He didn't seem to be as robust and filled with character like some of the other people in that story. And maybe that was something that it was supposed to be, but Ben McKenzie's voice definitely contributes to that. And obviously, to a certain extent, Ben McKenzie did make some impacts because he is now still in the DC universe to a certain degree. I personally think, and I've said this to people, I may not be watching Gotham anymore, but I think he is a fantastic a fantastic Jim Gordon. I really do. But yeah, I agree with you in regards to his voicing of Batman, but I do feel that it is a very well done film, but it's not going to be accepted by everybody. And I think it's because of the way the story is told, like the graphic novel. I just feel that some people will just find it a little unorthodox, and they may not appreciate it as much as the true fans of the original source material. But that's just the way that I feel about it.
Yeah, like with McKenzie, it's the dialogue versus the voiceover, the monologue stuff. When he's doing dialogue, he sounds really good. And in fact, there are times when he sounds a little bit like Conroy when he's doing dialogue. But as soon as they go to those inner thoughts, you know, that's when it becomes really monotone. But yeah, there's a few lines of dialogue that kind of popped out at me that made me laugh for various reasons. One is just we get a small clip of Vicky Vale when she's talking about Bruce Wayne, and she says Gotham's richest and best looking bachelor, and I'm like, how unprofessional are you, Vicky Vale, that you would be so open about how attracted you are to Bruce Wayne live on air during a news report. I mean, I don't know what reporters are like in the US, but she'd never make it on the BBC with those kind of comments. And there's another just a throwaway line when we first introduced to Flass in the police station. We first introduced to Flass when he meets up with Gordon, but a little bit after that in the police station, we hear kind of like the arse end of a conversation in which Flass tells someone. And he just says he's talking about Jim. He's talking about Gordon. He says, Jimmy just throws the 50 back in the Padres' face. And it's like, that's how corrupt this city is. Right. That he's talking about a clergyman there, a padre, a supposed man of God, that Jimmy, i.e. Gordon, has been offered a bribe by this padre. And it's like, what on earth? You know, that's how corrupt Gotham is, that even the clergymen need to bribe the cops. So I thought that was just an interesting line of dialogue that, if you're paying attention, it builds up a picture of this city that we're dealing with. Right. But yeah, I feel this is kind of it's kind of three people's origin stories, really. Yes. You know, we get Catwoman as well, but hers is a much smaller role. I do feel like Gordon's and Batman's are pretty even weighted, really. When you actually look at the different elements of the story, I think Gordon maybe gets a bit more dialogue, but that's because, let's face it, Batman isn't exactly the biggest talker in the world. But when you look at screen time, when you look at what the characters have to do, I do think it's quite evenly weighted, and it was like that in the comic book as well. So you do feel like you're being pulled into these two men, you know, these two men's lives, and how they're being drawn together, almost forced together because of just how corrupt the city is that they're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, my thoughts that I actually did want to bring this at some point, but in regards to Catwoman, I mean, I didn't really remember her much from the graphic novel because I read it such a long time ago, but I really found her I really didn't know what to think about her character. I mean, I loved the fact that they got Eliza Dushku to voice her. I thought that she was an excellent voice for Catwoman, but is it just me, or did she just come off as a big baby? Like, she basically was so upset that Batman was getting all of the attention for taking down all of these criminals, where at the same time, we don't even know what she is. It's kind of funny to a certain extent how she's actually trying to play the hero at the same time, when we all know that she really is more of an anti-hero at this point than an actual hero. But I really found her character to just be so pointless in this whole story. I was like, what was this? And I wish I could get...
I don't find it pointless at all. I think it's actually something that Christopher Nolan picks up on in his trilogy, which is that this idea that once Batman comes into play, he inspires people in more ways than one. And Catwoman wouldn't exist without Batman, is essentially what this film is saying, is what the graphic novel is saying as well. Because, she's this woman who she's a powerful woman, but she's not empowered. She's a prostitute, basically. And it takes this guy, this Batman, to come on the scene to give her a new vision, to empower herself, so that actually she says screw you to her pimp, and she goes off, and she's like, I need to do something different, and that thing that is different is Catwoman. But there's ego there, there's going to be ego involved in that when she wants to go her own way and create something like Catwoman. She also wants to be recognized in the same way that Batman is. She's in a sense idolized Batman because that's how Catwoman was born. But now nobody seems to be idolizing her in the same way, and I think that does rub her the wrong way. So I like this character, and I like how it's played here. I always liked how it was written in Year One, and I'm not particularly big on the majority of times in which Frank Miller has written female characters. I'll say that now.
Okay.
So it's actually quite surprising to me how well this character of Catwoman, Selina Kyle, in here comes across. I think he handles her really well, in fact. Whereas I can't say that about a lot of the female characters he's done in other graphic novels, in other stories.
Okay. No, you make a good point there. Now I'm sort of thinking a little bit deeper into it. I mean, to a certain extent, it's still not one of my favorite parts of the film, and that's maybe just me, but you're absolutely right. He was an inspiration to others, and sometimes when you can be an inspiration, it doesn't necessarily bring positive results. I mean, because if there's one thing that I know about Catwoman is that she is in fact willing to kill if she has to, and still that's one thing that Batman will not do. So I see where you're coming from in terms of inspiration, and yes, I felt that her character was a character. Just for me personally, I just really didn't really focus on her character as much as I did Jim Gordon's story and Batman's story. What did you think of some of the other characters that were featured in this film? Like, what were your impressions of the portrayal of Flass as well as Commissioner Loeb? Because apparently these are names that we have seen in the Batman lore later on. I mean, Flass was in Batman Begins, and Commissioner Loeb I don't know if he is or was now because I stopped watching after season 2, but he's in Gotham in the Gotham show.
He is, and he was also in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I just wasn't focusing on that. I was curious if it was or not. But the thing is, maybe in Batman Begins, he really didn't come off as an extremely corrupt commissioner.
He came across as somebody who didn't like Gordon. And you kind of got the feeling in Batman Begins he didn't like Gordon because he didn't toe the line. He didn't take bribes. He wasn't corrupt. So that by its very nature suggests that he is corrupt. But yeah, I mean, certainly by the second film when he's just, the way he talks to Gordon, you get the sense that he isn't the most noble of creatures. But I mean, that's by the by. That's Nolan's films. But yeah, I mean, yeah, he's in Gotham as well, a series that I am going through on my channel as it happens, reviewing every episode. But Flass is a bizarre one, really, because he's someone that I wouldn't have expected to have gotten the shelf life that he has managed. Because he was just, he's a bit of a side character for Gordon to rub up against in Batman Year One. So the fact that he has gone on to be in all these different media, film and television, it kind of surprised me. But here, he serves his purpose, and you kind of get a few laughs out of him as well, I think. He's a bit of a tough nut. He's someone you love to hate. Like when we first see him with Gordon, and he just goes over to those street punks and just starts wailing on them, starts beating them up, even though he's not got any evidence from them. He finds a little tiny bag of drugs, and it's like, it makes you question, was it really worth going on the offensive that hard for the sake of that? So right off the bat, he's someone that you kind of want to see get nailed. And then when you see him beating Gordon up with his cronies, all the more it makes you want Gordon to get payback. So when Gordon does get payback, it's really sweet. It's a really sweet moment, and quite a violent moment as well. I mean, he was always reasonably violent in the comic books, but here they do go pretty hard, I think.
They do.
With regards to the physical violence. There's nothing majorly bloody in it, but there's still things that are quite impactful because of that realism, because of that grittiness. You know that if somebody is hammering their fist into a guy's face in the way that Gordon does here, it's.
Well, I mean, that's what I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, if there's one thing that I can say that's the strongest part about Batman Year One is that it really doesn't feel like a superhero story. It's more of a cop drama. This is something, these are events that you would see like on an episode of NCIS or CSI. So that's a very strong point. I mean, I think that that's one of the main reasons why Frank Miller is so praised in the world of comic books, because of the fact that his stories are so real. Like, that these are stories that you can actually find in real life, like homicide and corruption and all of these things. So the fact that he brings this realism to comics is why I feel the fans just keep coming back whenever he has something new to give. And it's also because of the fact that he's made these stories that they've just been carried on in so many different depictions, and now even comic stories themselves, like you see them in a lot of X-Men stories, and even some of the Spider-Man stories that I read after Batman Year One, they've gotten very real, and that's what I like about it. Yeah. So what would you?
I can't remember what you said, but something kind of triggered a memory about the. It was when Gordon runs Flass off the road. It was really nicely animated.
Very nice, yeah.
The car kind of ramming the other car, and then that car kind of sliding down that ditch. It looked very real, which I only give so much credit for, because in the past with these movies, and we'll get to it when we get to The Dark Knight Returns as well, car smash ups in these animated movies tend to not translate very well because they can often come off as quite weightless, like the cars kind of move in bizarre ways where you don't really feel the realism behind them. That's just something I've noticed in the past with the way that they're able or not able to animate these car crashes and things. And so that's why it kind of stuck out to me when I was watching it here, that when he rams Flash off the road, it looks really good.
No, that's definitely a valid point. Again, the animation is fantastic. So this is unfortunately not your favorite animated film in this library. It's still Wonder Woman, if I'm not mistaken. So my question to you is, how does that feel? If this is your favorite Batman story in graphic novel form, what is it about the animated film that lacks for you? It's a question that I was just thinking about, and I really wanted to know your thoughts.
Well, when I made the statement, the rather bold statement, that Wonder Woman was my favorite, I had seen that one just in that moment. And I'd only seen Batman Year One the one time up until that moment. That, you know, when we were way back when we made that Wonder Woman show. Now I'm still not so sure I'm willing to knock Wonder Woman off that top spot, but this does come about as close as any film has. And honestly, if there was going to be something, you know, as you just asked, it's that running time. It's an hour long, and for me, I always struggle to call something a feature-length movie when it's an hour. I think 70 minutes is about as short as I like to go to call something a feature film. I don't know. I feel like they, and I mean, we'll get to the Killing Joke when we get to the Killing Joke. But one of the things that makes that film suffer is the fact that they've padded it out. So you don't want them to pad something out just for the sake of it, just to make it longer. But I do kind of feel like they could have padded it out a bit. But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because if they'd have padded this out to give us an extra 10, 15 minutes, would it be this good? That's the question. What would you add to it to beef up that running time? And given that, like I say, I think that graphic novel is perfect, and they've pretty much just done a straight adaptation here. I don't know that there is anything they could do. Maybe pacing, maybe slow the scenes down, give them a bit more chance to breathe, I guess. But beyond that, no, there isn't a right lot that I could suggest that they could do to improve it. But it's just that, really. That when I watch Wonder Woman, I feel like I'm getting a feature film. When I watch this, I feel like I'm almost getting a feature film. It's a damn good almost feature film, but it's still just an almost feature film.
Yeah, I feel that this one, you know, every single time I watch it, I like it more. Like when I first saw it, I really didn't think it was one of the better films, but every single time I do watch it, it gets better and better and better. So if I were to actually rank it at this point in time with my usual Lawn Gnome ranks, I'd probably at this point in time give it a very strong 3.5 stars out of 4. And I wouldn't be surprised if I watched it like 2 more times and then just give it the perfect score. I just feel that there's just something about it when the more you watch it, the more you catch something. The more you watch it, the more you appreciate another aspect of the film. And that's why I feel that this one is definitely one of the few that people really do need to see, especially if they want to see a very original depiction of Batman in film. It's one of the better Batman films that I've ever seen.
Yeah. While you're giving your rating, I'll give mine. I give this a 5 out of 5. I do. I love it. I just think it's a fantastic story in graphic novel form, animated movie form. I think they've done a cracking job. I know I've had a few minor criticisms, but like I say, with any film, there is no such thing as a perfect film. The Dark Knight is my favorite movie of all time. If I really wanted to, and I don't, but if I really wanted to, I could find things wrong with it. The Godfather, I could find things wrong with it. Apocalypse Now, I could find things, don't matter what it is. If you look hard enough, you can find things wrong with it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like you don't want to hear my thoughts on Apocalypse Now. Let me just say that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's avoid that bomb then.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't get me started. Right.
I already saw your wrath on Dances with Wolves. So yeah, I don't want you to get started. I'm about to watch Ben-Hur tomorrow, so I'm hoping that I'm going to enjoy that movie.
If you do not like that film,
I know. I'm terrified that I'm going to hate it. I really am, but I'm going to watch it tomorrow. I'm going to tell you how I feel.
Man alive.
Anyway, so
I gave that film a perfect score.
Well, it got all the awards that it deserved. So I'm saying this: if it's gotten all those Oscars, and I love Charlton Heston, then Ben-Hur has got to be a good movie. Seeing it for the first time, It
was. It was as good as Dances with Wolves, mate.
All right. Well, something. I'll disagree with you there until I see Ben-Hur. I'll let you know. But anyway,
yeah. So Batman Year One, 5 out of 5 from me, and a 3 out of 4 from you.
Okay, so along with this movie, we got our final DC Showcase short, and it was sort of a somber moment to know that they were going to stop doing that after they made this Catwoman short. I really wanted them to continue doing those, and I guess it was because of the failure of the DC Showcase film series that they did with Superman and Shazam, The Return of Black Adam, with all the other little shorts that were featured in past releases in this library. But yeah, unfortunately, Catwoman is the last one. And what I love about that one, it's great to get Eliza Dushku back for Catwoman in this short. And it's basically Catwoman doing her own style of vigilantism to a certain extent. What I do love about that movie is I love the short. I love the animation when it comes to the action sequences in that short. I think it's brilliant.
With one caveat.
Mm-hmm.
And I just looking down at my notes, I said just a little while ago that we'd get to it when we get to the Dark Knight Returns. It actually wasn't the Dark Knight Returns I was thinking about. It was this short. There is a car chase sequence in this film, and it is terribly animated. Just the way it's choreographed is bizarre. Sometimes there are cars there, and then they cut to a different shot, and then back to it, and the cars are completely different. The geography of it doesn't make sense. And then like I say, it looks like the way it's animated, it kind of comes across as like just wooden blocks, just kind of not really moving properly like cars. It don't work for me, that scene.
I mean, I do like the action sequence in the bar. I do like that one, along with the music that they use. I think it works.
Take you can't hear you, mate. You've disappeared.
Okay, that's one. I'm referring to the action sequence in the bar, the fight scene. I like that.
Yeah, I like that fight scene. I don't like what seems to be 20 minutes of Dirty Dancing. I get it, I get that. No, you know what? I don't get it. I don't get.
You don't want to put that baby in the corner. Let me tell you.
Oh man, it just seems to go on forever. We have this scene
I agree with you. I do.
Yeah, it's like, and for an animated thing, and for a short, if it was a feature film, okay, you could probably justify the length, but we've got like a 10-minute short, and you're going to spend 2 minutes of it. And I know that doesn't sound a lot, but when your whole running time is 10 minutes, 2 minutes being taken up by striptease dancing, it just feels really pervy to me, to be honest. And it feels like the kind of Frank Miller female character that I'm used to seeing him write. Not the Catwoman we got in Batman Year One, but the kind of Catwoman I would expect him to write based on his other material. And I don't like it. And I know he didn't write this. He's not responsible for anything to do with this. So I kind of feel like maybe someone trying to do Frank Miller in a shot, and it just doesn't work for me in that regard. I like Catwoman's attitude in this. She's pretty badass. I do like you say, the fighting choreography in it. It moves along fairly briskly. It is entertaining, but it also, yeah, like I said, there's a few bad spots with regards to the animation, and I do cringe a bit with all that striptease dancing that's going on. I don't have much more to say in it than that, so I'll just give you my rating. My rating for it is a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I look at it more as the showcase's last hurrah. You know, like it was the last showcase short. They kind of wanted to do whatever they possibly could to just give it a proper send-off. But yeah, I feel that it's not perfect. And again, much like Catwoman for me in the actual film of Batman Year One, it's also kind of forgettable besides the action sequences for me. It's like, if there's one of those showcases that will always resonate with me out of all the ones that were made, it is without a doubt The Spectre. The Spectre was just fantastic. I love this whole animation style of that showcase. This one for me, not so much. I'd probably give it a 2.5 stars out of 4. But yeah, it was just a pity
now
that
I feel like I was too generous, to be honest. I'm
somewhere in
tempted
the
to
middle
drop
for
it
me,
to
really.
2.5.
Somewhere in the middle for me. But yeah, well, technically, if I give it a 2.5 and you give it a 3, then pretty much based on our ranking systems, we gave it the same score. So don't feel so upset about that.
All right.
But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like the showcases were a great idea. I wish that they could have continued. You know, the important thing is I have them so I can watch them whenever I want. And that's pretty much where we'll leave it there. They're gone now. But
and I never tend to revisit showcases, to be honest, unless I've watched the actual feature that they've come on with, and I've got a bit more time to kill, and you know, I'll just look at the special features and go, oh, go on then, I'll watch the showcase. But I never think to kind of just say, you know what, I fancy digging the showcases out and watching them. To me, the problem is because they're dealing with that short running time, they tend to just be little action movies where the stories aren't really that important, to be honest.
Right. All right. Well, we definitely have plenty of time left to spare. I'm actually kind of glad that we didn't go over an hour on Batman Year One, because we've got what I like to call the big one to talk about next. We've got what's probably known to many as the greatest Batman story in all of comics, and that, of course, well, to most, maybe not to you, but to most, honestly, for me, a Death in the Family is really growing on me as the greatest, but that's just my own personal opinion. But we will talk about The Dark Knight Returns, or in the film's case, Batman The Dark Knight Returns. Now, because of the fact that this was coming out around the time where everybody realized that it was a good idea to split their stories into 2 separate films so they can get everything in, to a certain degree, we blame Harry Potter for that, because that was the first. It was the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2.
But well, if you really want to blame someone, blame Back to the Future. So
yeah, to a certain degree, but I will not invoke the Holy Trilogy. I'm sorry. But anyway, then you had idiotic things like Twilight Breaking Dawn split into 2, and then you had the last book of the Hunger Games split into 2. But Then you had Dark Knight Returns Parts 1 and 2.
Let's not forget The Matrix.
Yeah, and The Matrix. I'm not going to say that's the Holy Trilogy, that's for sure. That was more of a cliffhanger, but whatever. You know something? One day we will go, one day I think we will make a live show and just talk about movie trilogies in general. But anyway, so this time around, the story was broken up into 2 parts. We have part 1 and part 2. For me, and we'll talk a little bit later as we come to an end, because later on, these 2 parts were united as one film. But from what I could tell, when you read the graphic novel as much as I had, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did, when the DVDs were being released, read the graphic novels first so you can compare and contrast. So I read the first 2 books of The Dark Knight Returns, because that's what the first movie was going to be about. And when you look at those 4 parts and you actually split them up into halves, they really are 2 separate stories that do link to a certain degree, because the main focus of the movie is pretty much Batman just coming back. And that's where we will begin. We will begin with The Dark Knight Returns, Part 1. The last movie, well, not necessarily the last one, but this 2-parter was actually a very big milestone for the entire DC animated film library, because this was the last one that was actually produced by Bruce Timm before he went on sabbatical. And he didn't show up to produce any more of these direct-to-video films until Justice League Gods and Monsters. Just in case nobody knew that, that's a little fun fact for you guys today. So I was very excited because I love this story, and I was really curious to see how they were going to do this, specifically because they were going to split it up. I had a feeling it was going to be split up the exact way it did end up being split. But let's go into the first film. Personally, the one thing that really took time for me to really enjoy was Peter Weller voicing Batman. I kind of thought that Kevin Conroy would have been great, but the more I watch this movie, the more I really like Peter Weller, because to a certain degree, he sort of feels like an older Kevin Conroy to a certain extent, you know, to a small degree. But I personally really enjoy the first part of this set of films. I love the animation. I love the fact that it has an 80s-like score, because this movie does take place when it was written in the 1980s. That's what it was supposed to be, apparently. And I just love the fact that it has like a synthesizer in the score, especially in that scene where the criminals are in the warehouse, in the abandoned building, and they're waiting to find Batman. It sounds like Terminator. It sounds like Beverly Hills Cop. It just screams 80s to me. And as a product of the 80s, it's something that I just love. And I also love how they specifically tried to make sure that they got those beautiful panel shots that you see in the comic itself. Like when Batman is leaping through the sky and you just see a shadow and then you see the lightning bolt. Like, that's just fantastic. I love that so much.
Yeah, I actually, I'll say it now. I prefer this part over the second part. I actually think it's a stronger movie. I think it's much more focused. If you want to count the 2, Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, if you want to count them as 2 separate movies, which you can do, I think the first one is better than the second one. I think it's much more focused. It has less little niggles about it to me than the second one, which we'll get into when we get to the second one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's only one thing really in this first one that sticks out at me as something that kind of, I'm not so hot on. and that's Carrie Kelly.
You mean this Carrie Kelly?
Yeah. I feel that she's a really weak Robin, and not because she's female. That's nothing to do with it. I just feel like she's really underwritten. She comes out of nowhere, and it's like you think about Tim Drake. He kind of ingratiated himself into Batman's world in a very similar way, but he there was a lot more intelligence behind what he did, and there was a lot more of a build-up because obviously that character was kind of built up over many issues within the Batman comics. So yeah, I mean, Frank Miller was trying to build this character up in essentially 2 issues of this story. So for me, I feel like she becomes Robin too quickly, and it's when they do the final attack towards the end, or it might be the one in the middle. I don't know. I can't remember now. But it's where Batman's got the tank, and he's going down the hill in the tank, and then she's coming down as Robin, and it's like, hang on a minute, Batman, right? One of the best fighters in the world needs a tank to get through these guys, and yet she's just flipping over rocks, doing somersaults, having had no training at this point at all, because her training starts in the second film, and she already looks like a Robin. She already looks like she has the skills to, because she's fighting those mutants. She's leaping over rocks, doing backflips and everything, and going downhill, while all the time Batman needs a tank in order to do it. So yeah, that bit for me, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's a really weak point, and I just feel like she did not need to be there in that scene. I think, yeah, build her up, yeah, get her to do something that kind of risks her life that maybe she doesn't quite pull off because she needs the training, and then her character, I feel would have been a bit more ingratiated to me personally for the second film when she does start her training.
Well, to be fair, I mean, it was very much accurate to how she was in the comics. I mean, that is a very interesting story.
I know. I'm not saying this is a problem solely for the film. Okay, that's a problem that exists with the comic. I don't like that about the comic. I don't like it here.
You're absolutely, yeah. You're right, because she literally just shows up. I mean, I think there was something, maybe they left it out of the movie, but I swear that I remember that she mentioned somewhere that she took self-defense courses, so she knew a little bit of something, and I'm quite certain that in the comics she does mention that she knew a little bit of gymnastics, which answered for her tumbling. Like, she obviously knew how to do that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking and not really. Maybe that's fake news. I'm not sure. I may have to reread the graphic novel.
Either way, whether it is or it isn't mentioned here. And I always think that if you're adapting a book of any kind, that adaptation, the movie has to stand on its own 2 feet. It has, you have to be able to give it to someone who has no knowledge of the source material, and it has to work on its own,
right,
on those levels. And for me personally, and this, I have no other criticisms, is the truth of this episode. It's just this one little niggle kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. And when we give our scores, I'm going to score this very highly because I love it. Everything else about it, other than that moment with Carrie Kelly, I love it. I love the rest of this film. I love the voice cast in it. I love the artwork.
Yeah. I
love how dark it is. I love the 2 fight scenes that Batman has with the mutant leader. It's just a really great story about an aging vigilante coming back into the game.
Right.
And again, dealing with that same kind of corruption that Miller dealt with in Batman Year One. Only now it's kind of at a higher level because it's at a government level rather than just the police level. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, like when we take a look at part one, I mean, I also love a lot. I agree with you in regards to the voice cast, by the way. I mean, I also thought that getting Ariel Winter from Modern Family, I thought that she was a very, I felt that getting her to voice Carrie Kelly was a perfect choice because she really, I mean, especially as someone who watches the show Modern Family, she, to me, looks a little bit like Carrie Kelly because she's got the big thick glasses and she's not the big, and she's a very small person. So I kind of like and I kind of like thought that the voice for Robin was perfect for Carrie Kelly. I really like that. And as I said, Peter Weller, you know, he grew on me. I felt in the beginning he was a little bit one-dimensional, and then we get to those points where he has these fantastic moments where he says some really, even though he's trying to be very dark, he says some stuff that just makes me laugh. Like, I can't stop laughing at the scene where he's telling the guy, yes, you're also bleeding to death. And right now, I'm the only one that can get you to a hospital in time. Like, and I also loved how, even though he was an older guy, it was crazy how you could see like there was 10 times more fear in these people's eyes. Like again, I'll go back to that abandoned building scene. I love it when one of those guys says he didn't used to make noise. Like I loved that line. Like that was just awesome. And he really was just, you know, the animation, you know, you really get the graphic novel truly coming to life with those action sequences. Like when he is just pummeling one of those guys to a bloody pulp, it's like, oh my god, you can feel it. You can really feel that. I also liked David Selby as Commissioner Gordon. I thought that was a very good choice. I thought that he really, you know, for a character that until Batman the Animated Series, we really didn't get much from Commissioner Gordon. I mean, I remember your review of Batman and Robin and your attitude about Commissioner Gordon. But, you know, thanks to Batman the Animated Series, we got a very strong character in Commissioner Gordon. And I really thought that David Selby's portrayal gave him, while he was still a strong cop at his age, I also think he had so much humanity in him, especially when he was sitting with Bruce and he was talking to him about how he's doing, like that time where he was saying you never used to drink alcohol before, and asked him if he was talking to Dick Grayson at one point in time. Like I really saw that the two of them really had gone from just police commissioner and vigilante to actual real good colleagues. And I really appreciated it about those two. I really liked that. And one of my favorite voice castings in this movie is the mutant leader. I love Gary Anthony Williams. He was fantastic as the mutant leader. I just loved the fact that he made him not even human. He made him this big menacing monster who didn't even speak English well. Like that's the way you're supposed to look at this guy. Like this guy is just a beast. This guy is a beast who will destroy you. And I loved the voice. It felt so real. That's one of the few things that I will say. And as I said, Peter Weller grows on me every time. I feel that the voice casting really fits everybody in these first two parts. And I also love the Two-Face story. I think it's a great story in this. And the whole concept of Dr. Wolper, who's basically the person who's taking care of all these criminals, also brilliantly voiced by Michael McKean. I love Michael McKean. And I just loved how this guy was so delusional.
Yeah.
How he really feels that all of these nut jobs can actually be healed. And probably the stronger and probably the strongest part about this film is how this is all just one big news story. You know? It's like every single day I turn on the TV in real life and I see the talking heads on the television, the moderates and the Republicans versus the liberals and the Democrats. Like, it's so funny how it feels so real when you just see how the media is perceiving these fantasy characters. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, and I love it. It just makes it even more realistic, and all the more, oh geez, I'm trying to figure out the word. Like, you really indulge in this, you know, like you eat it up.
Relevant, yeah. Just yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you. I think this is a film, a story. It's a graphic novel. You know, in whichever form you take it, it's definitely about the power of the media, to some degree. You know, and how the media can lead society for better or worse. So yeah, and Batman kind of plays to that. He knows what he has to do to kind of affect things by doing things in such a way that the media report on it in a very specific way. So yeah, I do love those moments in it. But the Two-Face storyline, I'd completely forgotten, to be honest, the stuff about Two-Face when I came back to this, and the whole stuff with Two-Face came in. I was like, oh right, I yeah, completely forgotten about this stuff. Couldn't remember, and I couldn't remember where it was going to go, and I couldn't remember if that even was Two-Face, or whether it was an imposter. So yeah, I was really stumped by that when I watched it this time around. But I like that story. I like the way it's interwoven. It feels a bit more natural than an element that we're going to get in the second part, which again we'll get into when we get there.
Yeah.
But
I think
yeah.
I think it really dives deep into the whole concept of mental illness. It's like, even when Two-Face just looks human again, it just didn't stop him from being who he was. And that was a very deep, that scene where he's literally on his knees just staring at Batman, and the line that really gets me is, says, at least both sides match now. Like, that's very impactful, you know?
Mm.
It's sort of like, when you basically made my face look absolutely perfect, you basically allowed my dark side to basically take over my entire persona. That's the way that I look at it. And it's crazy. It really makes you think, and I really appreciate that about the story.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
Like I say, I overall I just think it's really well structured. I love the pacing of it.
Absolutely.
I like how engaged I am with the story, even though a lot of the characters are quite new, or very different variations on familiar characters. I really loved it. I'd give this a 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I would probably give this one a 4 out of 4 as well. And we also had that amazing fight sequence with the mutant leader. And I love the lines that Batman says in that. Like, I love the fact that this is not like this is a hospital, or like, this is a surgeon. I'm the surgeon. This is the operating table.
Mm.
And if you've seen Batman and the Return of the Cape Crusaders, they use that line in that movie as well. And hearing Adam West say that makes me die every time. God bless him. It was so sad to hear that he had gone. He really was a great guy. So glad to see him in that whole, take a line like that, because not only does he use that line, he also uses Michael Keaton's line, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." Like, that's just fantastic. That's just fantastic. But we're gonna go into that movie at another point somewhere down the line. But yeah, 4 out of 4, hands down. And the ending of the first part is fantastic, because we basically get a little bit of a taste of what we're getting in the next part. And that was what made me even more excited for part 2, because we were going to get our good boy in blue, Superman, and we were going to get this fella right here, who, to me, this Joker in this story, it's not one of those, it's nothing like Mark Hamill's Joker in Batman the Animated Series. This is a Joker that actually scares the living shit out of me. He really does. And
yeah, I think for me the best graphic novel or comic book version of the Joker, it's, for me personally, is still the Alan Moore Killing Joke Joker. But yeah, I like what they do here. I like it in the sense that I don't. Joker in this is very unlikable. He's very scary. He's absolutely crazy. And not to jump ahead to towards the end of the film, but the bit where he just whips a gun out and just starts shooting anyone in his path.
I was so glad they kept that in. That was something I was wondering if they were going to hold back. I really did.
Yeah. And they don't hold back at all. And while you're watching it, you're kind of like, man, stop this guy.
Yeah,
because you literally feel yourself saying, stop this guy. Somebody needs to stop this guy. Somebody needs to put him down.
Yeah, I saw this with a friend of mine for the first time, and these are even things that you don't even see in the panels of the comic. You see some parts of it, but you don't see all of it. You don't see him. I don't remember in the comics him going through the tunnel of love and basically going with a gun. Oh, excuse me, bang, sorry, my fault, bang, bang, bang. Like, oh my God, I couldn't. And you see the blood splatter and everything. Like, I couldn't believe that. And I give them props. Like, they did not hold back. They wanted to give us the story that everybody knows and loves. And while I think that the first one, like you, I think we said this earlier, you think the first one is better. And even though I agree with you, I still feel that the first half of this movie is just incredible. It really is. And let's talk about Michael Emerson. Okay? I will say that I was curious to know who they were going to get to voice the Joker in this movie. I didn't even know who was voicing him in the first film, even though he had such a small piece in the film until the very end. But when I found out that it was Michael Emerson from Lost, I literally shook. Like, I went pale when I heard that they were choosing him. Because I've seen him in a little movie.
I never watched Lost, so that...
Well, here's the thing. I saw him in a little movie called Saw. And he played a psychopath. And he terrified me. He terrified me to no end. So when I found out that he was going to be voicing the Joker, I said, I'm like, oh God, this is gonna be a scary Joker. And I was right. Hands down. Like, that scene when he's on that live television show and he asks to keep the mug. Like, I knew what was going to happen, but I was biting on my nails because I knew this was going to not end well, and I was just so terrified to see how it was going to be depicted in film. And this Joker just made me terrified. He really did. He makes Pennywise look like a circus clown. He really does.
There's something quite effeminate about him as well.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, but I think that feeds into the creepy factor with the way his character works. Yeah, I you know, still not prepared to say he bests Hamill. Let's face it, who can when it comes to animated Jokers?
You cannot compare them.
You just can't. But
no, you cannot.
But he is a damn good Joker. I will say.
He's fantastic. But it's also because it's such a different Joker. That's what it is. This Joker is not that fun. He's not Mark Hamill's Joker. He's not Cesar Romero's Joker. He's not Jack Nicholson's Joker. He's not. You see, Heath Ledger, I think, took a lot from this specific Joker, because Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight is also a very scary Joker.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just blocking someone from the comments.
Yeah, I saw that, and I have no idea where this suddenly turned into a hate comment. Listen, people, if you're watching and you're still hung up on Charlottesville, please stop and take this somewhere else. We don't need this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
While we're on the subject of comments, I will just read a few because there have been some while we've been talking.
Certainly.
And let's have a look. Razor Wire Reviews, Luke says, year one is so good. Cranston was perfect. Yep.
I agree.
Agreed.
I agree. Cranston was very, very good. I wish he was more involved in DC. I really do. I think he is, you know, part of me even wishes that he was going to be Commissioner Gordon in the new Justice League. I'm sure J.K. Simmons will kill it, but I would have loved to have seen Cranston, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And Dennis over at the Blue Corner asked if we've seen the new Batman Harley Quinn yet, and says that it's good. Just get ready for quite a few sex jokes and hints.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's why I'm sort of excited. I'm just curious about that one. And yes, guys, we are going to review that movie somewhere down the line. As you all know, especially if you are newcomers, by the way, welcome. We are going in order to a certain extent, but we will get to Batman Harley Quinn very, very soon. And we are looking forward to seeing it and reviewing it as well. And yes, I also see Patrick Holmes talking about the mutant leader and the final fight in Dark Knight Returns Part 1, and I totally agree. And I even said to him that, as I said earlier, Gary Anthony Williams voicing him was fantastic. We also have to remember that Rob Paulsen, famous voice actor Rob Paulsen, is in this movie as well. He's great. I love Rob Paulsen.
Robert Paulson.
Yeah,
he's from Fight Club.
No, Rob Paulsen is more known for classic cartoon voices like Yakko from the Maniacs.
There's a character, isn't there? My name is Robert Paulson.
I haven't seen Fight Club in a couple of years, so I got to rewatch that.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I do need to get on that again. But so Patrick Holmes gives The Dark Knight Part 1 a 5 out of 5.
I won't disagree. I will not disagree.
Yeah, but I'm struggling to remember now, but I think I might have to check my letterbox because I think I gave a 5 out of 5, not a 4.5. But yeah, I'm going to check on that just now because I want to be exact with my scores. But yeah, like one of the things that I really don't like about this part 2 is Toyman. What are your thoughts on Toyman?
Well, I'm trying to remember who Toyman is in this movie because I really don't remember him in this movie at all.
He's got those two rather bizarre little puppet things.
That's Toyman?
That's what I took it as, Toyman. Yeah.
No, I never looked at him as Toyman. Although you are giving me a very interesting. Now I'm looking at this in a whole big perspective, because for me personally, when it comes to anything Bruce Timm did, the only time he did Toyman beautifully was in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League. I love Toyman in those, but I always thought that guy was just one of his cronies with the two robot things. I didn't know.
I am positive that is meant to be Toyman.
I would never. I honestly do not know. If anyone in the comments knows, let us know, because now I'm intrigued. I'm extremely curious at this point in time.
Yeah, I am.
You've opened up a can of worms, my friend.
Well, either way, if it is or it isn't, I think it is. It doesn't work for me because
it's secondary.
It's just. It gets a little bit. Everything's been quite grounded up till this point, and I know we're going to get Superman, but you kind of accept Superman because he's an alien from another world. Whereas Toyman creating these little kid robots that kind of fly, it all just gets a little bit too science fictiony for me. And I don't have a huge problem with science fiction, but when the majority of your story has been grounded, has been very real, it kind of takes me out of it a bit. So for me, it just felt misplaced. I didn't like that element.
It's so funny that you said that because you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that I think the biggest weakness about this movie compared to the first part is that it stops being really down to earth and starts being more fantasy driven. And it, to me, begins when Superman comes into the story. Because then all of a sudden they start talking about the whole thing about superheroes no longer being allowed to do their thing. They start mentioning all the other superheroes like Green Arrow and Green Lantern and Wonder Woman, and it suddenly stops being this incredible detective slash cop story and a fantastic down-to-earth Batman story to all of a sudden it's turning into like a really dark version of the Super Friends. Like, let's reunite, let's get the band back together. That's what it feels like to a certain extent. And while I do enjoy Superman in this movie, I also think that Mark Valley, who I had seen in a show that I absolutely love called Boston Legal, I was excited that he was going to voice Superman. I thought that he did a great job. Also, with Oliver Queen in this story, voiced by the great voice actor Robert Atkin Downs. I love that too. And we even have Maria Canals, who voiced Hawkgirl. She was Ellen Yendel, the new police commissioner in this movie, which I also thought was, I also liked that part of the story also.
Yeah, I did.
The whole fact about how when Commissioner Gordon leaves, all of a sudden Batman is no longer a member of the fighting forces of good. He's now public enemy number one, and vigilantes don't stand anymore. And that's also one of the main reasons where I feel Superman coming in at that moment to a certain degree makes sense, because he has now been brought in to stop Batman because obviously the police can't do it.
But it also does show the symbiotic, I guess, for want of a better word, relationship between Batman and Commissioner Gordon. The fact that both of them are able to function as well as they did because they work together. They are this team. They are partners, so to speak.
Exactly.
So when one partner retires or is forced to retire, it kind of puts the other one in a bit of a no man's land where they're suddenly having to kind of fight for survival. So, and if the tables were turned, if Batman was no longer around, you kind of feel like, yeah, Gordon would be in a bit of a hotspot. He wouldn't have his go-to vigilante to kind of work with. So yeah, it is very illuminating on the relationship between Gordon and Batman, I think.
Yeah, I would probably say that besides the Joker scene, especially the fight in the Tunnel of Love, I mean, that whole dialogue before we all know what Joker does, like, that's just so powerful. And the mixture of the animation and the mixture of the soundtrack in there, it's absolutely fantastic. But another very strong part of the film in terms of the action sequences, I love the opening fight scene with that neo-Nazi woman and her cronies. And what I also was very happy about, alongside, you know how I said that they didn't hold back? I was actually saying to myself, are they actually going to let this woman be bare-breasted with swastikas on her breasts? And lo and behold, they kept it. I was impressed that they actually did that.
Yeah. She definitely got an interesting look, I'll say that.
Yeah, well, again, when I first saw that character in the graphic novels, I was like, okay, we're going in this direction. This is interesting. Where do we go from here? No, I loved that fight sequence. I thought that it was great. I really liked it. But if I'm going to give this movie a major fault, and it pains me to say this, I think that, I've been waiting to actually bring this one. when Batman puts on the armor and he faces off against Superman, I did not appreciate how that translated into animation. I did not enjoy that fight sequence. And that's like, when I remember reading the comic book and seeing that fight between Batman and Superman, that's like, according to this old magazine that used to be around, it was a comic book price guide. It was called Wizard Magazine, where they had so much news of comics and price guides and coming attractions and whatnot. They once gave us a list of the greatest fights in all of comic book history. And Batman versus Superman in The Dark Knight Returns was their number one. It's a great fight sequence in the comic books, but I think that they totally botched it in this animated film. I did not appreciate it as much as I did in the comic books.
I gotta say, I don't quite feel that strongly about it, to be honest. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good fight scene. My problem is that the story itself feels like it feels like it kind of has too many endings. It feels like it's almost created, like I said, disjointed, I guess. That first part was very well structured, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas, like we got two fight scenes in there with the mutant leader, because it was the same character, and because Batman kind of got defeated in the first one, and he comes back and then overcomes the thing that had defeated him. It felt structurally more cohesive. Whereas here, we've got everything leading up to this fight scene with Joker, and then that's just done with. And then we've got this whole other thing in which there's now a fight scene with Superman. So it's almost like two completely separate stories that have been meshed together on top of a story that was part one. So it does feel very disjointed to me. It feels like, and if this is how it was in the graphic novel, which I think it is, pretty much, it feels like Frank Miller is almost trying to have his cake and eat it here. Like he's trying to present too much, too many ideas. He's throwing everything, including the kitchen sink.
Yeah, pretty much. I agree because first of all, one of the other things I completely forgot to mention was we truly find out at the very end of the day that Joker is and always will be an evil bastard, because he kills himself, and he did it specifically to make Commissioner Yendel feel that Batman actually kills somebody. So now Batman is officially a criminal. That's why. So to a certain degree, Joker really did have the last laugh, which is something that he always wanted. And then you have, like you said, a whole mishmash of things. You have Superman going to fight this civil war across in that little island and against the Soviets. And then you have the president asking him to do his bidding and stop Batman. And then you have the blackout in Gotham City. And then you have Batman actually showing his face, and he's no longer the creature of the night. Rather, he is the one that's going to bring law and order, and through martial law. He's got the Sons of Batman helping him. You see where I'm going with this? It's a mess. It's a tire fire on top of a dumpster fire in this matter.
Yeah, there's just a lot going on. Probably a bit too much, to be honest. It's still highly entertaining.
Absolutely.
Still really well animated, and it seems to be full of really great 5-star moments. But it's one of them kind of instances where the whole isn't quite as good as the sum of its parts. So whatever that saying is that people always say. So yeah, like I say, I still think it's a really great animated film. One of the best for the DC animated movies. I just think the first part is better, a lot, quite considerably so. I'd give this a 4 out of 5.
I'm giving this one a 3.5 stars out of 4. That's where I will go with it. I mean, so then that leads to the next question, and we are still very much under 2 hours, so we still have a little bit of extra time. I know that you've had a long day, and I know that you want to get to sleep soon. So the other thing that I really wanted to know was, because after part 2 came out, then they actually gave us a deluxe edition DVD package, Blu-ray package. No extra scenes, just tons and tons of special features. But it was basically both movies meshed into one whole film. And what happened was, I actually went out and I bought it, and I was planning on getting rid of the 2 that I already had, the 2 splits. And when I watched this film, parts 1 and 2 as a whole, it was exhausting. And I felt the combination of the 2 stories, just it lost so much of what I loved. And crazy enough, it made the first part feel so irrelevant. And the first part is the better film.
Yeah.
But what
you have to take them as 2 separate stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But what I will say, I'm sorry, please.
One is a bit more political. One is a bit more fantasy element, and one is a bit more just down and dirty, gritty, bit more of a thriller kind of thing. So when you put those 2 together, it's very uneven, I think. But if you think of it as one film and then kind of a sequel to it, you think about there's a slight, there's kind of change in tone between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, but it's acceptable, very acceptable, because it's a sequel to the film. It takes place a few years after the first one, this, that, and the other, so it works. If you suddenly edit Batman Begins and The Dark Knight together as one long film, and you're expected to watch them together as one long film, don't quite work, because the tone slightly changes, and that's what I feel like with this. Really, it's 2 separate films. They work well together as a film followed by a sequel, but not necessarily as one whole film.
Well, what I will say is, I think that one of the biggest mistakes in regards to both of these films, whether they were given as 2 separate films or one whole film, this movie should have been on the big screen. I know that Bruce Timm never wanted to go back to the big screen because, unfortunately, of the poor marketing that Mask of the Phantasm got, which is one of the greatest Batman films ever made. It's a brilliant animated film, people. If you love Batman and you love animation, you haven't seen Batman Mask of the Phantasm, please, I beg you, go see that movie. It is wonderful. But I feel after all this time, if there was any way for Bruce Timm to make a comeback and put his animation on the big screen, this was the time.
Mm.
Even if it was the full 2 hour and a plus movie, however long the runtime is with these 2 films combined, this movie would have made a killing at the box office, especially because of how well it is adapted from the original graphic novel. The fans would have been so pleased. Maybe the general public would not have understood it, but true Batman fans and Batman appreciators like yourself and myself, we would have been there front row center, night of, early screening, red carpet premiere, what have you. I would have been there, and I'm pretty certain that you would have too.
If they'd have released this as one long film, i.e. the deluxe edition in cinemas, I've gone to see this quite a few times, I think, at the cinema. Just out of interest, what would be your score for the film as a whole, for in the deluxe cut of it?
I'd give it a 3.5 stars out of 4, to be honest with you. But
yeah, I think overall, I'd give it a 4. So,
but I feel that if this movie would have actually come out as one whole film originally, and it wasn't split in 2 first, I probably would have given it a perfect score as a Batman fan and as an animation fanatic.
Yeah, yeah, because I think the weaknesses of the second one would be somewhat diluted within the context of a much bigger film. But once you shorten the length down and you're judging it just on that length, the niggles kind of become a bigger presence, I guess. You know,
Right.
so like 5 minutes worth of niggles in a 70-minute film make more of an impression than 5 minutes worth of niggles in a 2.5 hour film. You know, so yeah, I think as it stands, deluxe edition, which I haven't bought, but I did actually edit my own cut together. I'd give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay, yeah, okay, so we pretty much agree, and that's great.
Mm.
I'm glad to hear that. But obviously, these guys have gotten the message. You know, splitting of a story in this case will work, and we just found out that we are getting the next wave of films next year, and one of them is in fact going to be the true adaptation of the death and rebirth of Superman, and it's going to be a two-part film. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to do it. Do I feel that this is something that is necessary? Not so sure. I mean, we got Superman Doomsday, and Superman Doomsday being the first of this whole library of great films, you know, it was a great place to start. It's a very good film, but I'm curious to see how this is going to go because they're going to take it from the actual film adaptation. I would have loved to have seen Nightfall instead. I would have loved to have seen Kingdom Come instead, or maybe Blackest Night or something like that. I mean, I'm starting, even though I'm a huge Batman fan, especially when we go further on in this library. Is it just me? But I'm getting sort of sick of all these Superman and Batman films. I want more of these characters.
Yeah, and I'm not sick of any of the Batman ones so far, but I think certainly the Batman films have been much stronger than the Superman ones. I mean, I wasn't particularly big on Superman versus the Elite.
Oh, I don't think any of us were.
No,
And I,
but I if they adapt, I mean, I loved the Superman Doomsday film they've already done.
yeah, it's a good movie.
But you know what? If they're going to adapt it from the comic book and they're going to do it, if they're going to do it a faithful adaptation in the way that they did with this Dark Knight Returns, yeah, sign me up. I'd definitely be up for seeing that. If you get the cast right, animation right, boom. And it also gives me hope that if it's successful, if people latch onto it and really love it, it gives me hope that we will eventually get what I've always wanted, which is a Batman Nightfall adaptation.
I hope so too. I hope so too.
On that note, I think we will be best leaving it there. So, Steve, just give your wrap up and tell people where they can find you. And
Absolutely. You can all find me at my channel, The Lawn Gnome, and anything popular culture is what I do. I love to talk about everything from movies to music, television shows to Funko Pops. But also, I want to let people know that if you are a YouTuber that is brand new or someone that is looking to make some changes to your channel, for the past couple of years, I've actually been helping a lot of people in the community with ideas and tricks and tips. And I just want more positive people in this community. The world's a crazy place right now, and being in the United States, I'm seeing it full head on. And I just want people to know that there's a good person out there that is willing to do whatever it takes to make good things happen and make them all be done by good people. So you can find me at The Lawn Gnome. I will have this video also posted on my channel as well, and my Twitter information will be there as well. Please reach out, follow, subscribe, let me know what you're into, and I would love to help you become a voice here in this community that we have.
for those watching this video over on Steve's channel when he eventually puts it up. Yeah, you can find me at Brian Lomax Movie Talk. And if you're a fan of Batman, definitely check out my channel because I've done a lot of Batman related stuff. And I'm currently working my way through Gotham and reviewing every episode. So yeah, definitely plenty for you there to check out.
We'll be back soon.
But yeah, other than that, thank you for watching, and we will hopefully see you next time.